everybody!
Friends. It's Alexa and Mackie, and we're back for another What We Read video. We had a lot of catching up to do, so it's part 2, like Mackie just said. So Mackie's gonna kick things off right now.
That's right. So this is part 2 is Marvel Unlimited moment. That's right, where I get to talk about comics like they didn't come out 6 months ago and I'm just starting to read them for the first time. So again, it's worth about an Amazon Prime subscription, but you have every single Marvel, almost every single Marvel comic printed from time immemorial from 6 months to today, whenever today is for you. There's a bunch of stuff in there because since Marvel's recent acquisition, well, actually since Disney's recent acquisition of both Marvel and Star Wars, they kind of just squished it all together. So out of nowhere, on the Marvel Unlimited app, you get to see, which is basically like Netflix for comics, Marvel comics, there's a whole Star Wars bunch there. So I'll save that for last, but for now, I do want to highlight a few things that are actually on there that you could definitely read. So I finally got into Miles Morales' Spider-Man.
Yay, Miles! Pretty
much after they scrunched all of the worlds together. So I have read a little bit about Miles Morales back when they killed Peter Parker in the Ultimate Universe. It was a terrible, terrible death. And then Miles came swinging out of the pages of that. Now that the world has sort of been united into one, right? The Ultimate Universe and everything. This is about Miles. There's a lot of allusions to those early beginnings in the Into the Spider-Verse movies, which I think is kind of cool about Miles' sort of origin. So yeah, it's really great appearances from the other kind of young Avenger-y, well, they're called champions now, but Miss Marvel, the Kamala Khan, makes sort of an appearance, and that was kind of cool too. So highly recommend if you love yourself some Miles Morales, because he's ultimately a really cool, fresh take on Spider-Man. I might as well rename the first two issues Spider-Man versus Blackheart. Yeah, Blackheart, for those of you who remember, he's Mephisto's son, demon, kind of a loser, and you'll find out why. Another thing which just kind of blew me away, because Marvel has this habit of, if the comics aren't making money, or if we don't own the rights to them from a movie perspective, which is why they started killing off all of the X-Men at one point in time, but now that Fox bought the X-Men, guess what happened? Death of Inhumans. You heard me. It's a real title, The Death of Inhumans, because now that the X-Men are back into the fold, they're killing all of the Inhumans off for whatever reason, and a giant space war erupts, and poor Black Bolt is going to have to kind of like try to survive. I'm not too crazy about what's behind the reason why they suddenly get to Death of Inhumans, because I sort of know that, well, I don't know, but this speculation is, now that the X-Men are back, why invest in the Inhumans? The X-Men are always cooler, and what are we going to do with these extra guys? So, well, only room for one superpowered kind of race of individuals, I guess. So now genocide from an editorial perspective, which is not... Anyway, either way, I love the Inhumans. I love Black Bolt. I love Medusa. They are my OTP, non-human OTP, and that works. So I don't recommend it if you like Inhumans, but if you want to know what happens to them, that's there. My third set of comics that I started following is Old Man Hawkeye. Now, for those of you who don't know where the Old Man series kind of happened, it started out with Wolverine as Old Man Logan. That is basically what the movie Logan was sort of based on, where you have an older kind of Wolverine. Yeah, okay. Old Man Logan is set in a world where all of the villains basically banded together, got their act together, and basically decimated all of the heroes in one go. So it's a post-apocalyptic world led by the Red Skull, and Logan just happens to have been so broken at that time until an old Hawkeye, long hair, totally blind, but can still shoot arrows through sound, tells him, I got a job, can you help me out? It'll give you enough money to pay whatever. Okay. And then that's pretty much that. So Hawkeye, his destiny unfolds in the Old Man Logan series, but people decided to sort of write a prequel to that, focusing mostly on Hawkeye and what's going on in his sort of like almost Kill Bill. So it's basically a Kill Bill type story where he's like, I got a hit list, I'll make sure all of them get, you know, shot in the face with my arrows. In this post-apocalyptic world ruled by villains. Fun. I liked it.
I know, it sounds like it's fun.
Like, you know, it's like Tarantino light. You know, because I can totally see like somebody like Quentin Tarantino doing this. And finally, because Marvel and Disney, it's a whole thing. The entire comic book series for Thrawn, the first book, which we reviewed on this blog, written by Timothy Zahn, the comics version has finally ended. All 6 issues are out, and oh my goodness, exquisite. The art is great. The story is pristine. I like the book better because it details a lot of things. Yeah. But I like the comics too, because then I get to see what everybody looks like when they do the thing. So, I mean, call me crazy, but there's something about...
That's always fun.
It is, and plus I like seeing the Star Wars universe animated. So I think that's kind of cool. There are some allusions to, obviously, the Rebels series, which is where Thrawn has kind of get pulled into the mainstream. So again, Marvel Unlimited, comics to death. There's literally every single Marvel comic out there in the last at least 10 years are on there. And they keep importing stuff from like prior to that.
Cool.
So
That's
it's
really
just
cool.
it's so, if you love Marvel Comics, if you want to get caught up on their big arcs and everything, it's pretty much all there. Any comic that's ever come out ever from Marvel. So, which reminds me, I have to brush up on my Runaways. Okay, cool. So that's pretty much that.
Okay. What I am most excited about for this particular What We Read is that every single book that I get to talk about in this video is one that I really, really, really enjoyed. So, the very first one I'm going to talk about is a book that I actually mentioned in my favorites of 2018 video. The Gilded Rose by Roshni Chokshi, which is the first in a trilogy. It's Six of Crows in Paris meets National Treasure meets Indiana Jones. That's literally usually the comp I use for it because it really reminds me of all those things. It is about a hotelier named Severin, and he is determined to regain his family's birthright. They used to be part of the Order of Babel, who protect the Babel Fragment, which is a very powerful artifact that could create or destroy things. And in order to earn back his place, he is tasked to complete a heist. In order to complete this heist, he has to work together with his found family. There is a historian named Enrique who is Filipino, half Filipino anyway, and he is more white passing because he's mestizo, and he is determined to leave his mark on the world. There's Layla, who is a baker and a performer, and then there's Sophia, who is into engineering and blowing things up, and I love her for it. And there is Tristan, who is a gardener, and there is another character named Hypnos, who is something. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah, that's a cabin in Riordan's World.
Oh, anyway. True. What I love about this book is that it's a heist story, first of all, and I love heist stories, and there are riddles and puzzles, and there's like history thrown in there, there's mythology thrown in there, and like
cool.
Roshni just uses all these references so well and weaves them together beautifully in the story, and I just enjoyed like watching it unfold every minute. I also really love the characters a lot, and that's, as always, you guys know that characters and loving them on a personal level is very important to me when I'm reading anything, and I felt so strongly for these characters, especially Enrique, who is the best ever. I mean, all of the references to like Filipino history, the Ilustrados, the colonialism, I can't. Anyway, what I also really love about this is that it explores Paris in the around 1889, around the time when the Eiffel Tower was supposed to be the entrance to an exposition.
Wow.
It explores like this beautiful, wonderful, lush place, and it also explores who was in power and how they completely influence things and how colonialism plays a part in like these characters' lives and their stories. It's so fascinating. It's such a well-paced and interesting book, and I basically wanted to live in it because of all of the descriptions. I will avoid all the death-defying like moments, but I would like to live in it or at least visit it. And honestly, like, I cannot say enough good things. I will link to my review because I'm probably more coherent than that, but I will say that I thoroughly enjoyed this one, and I'm so excited to read the sequel, and you should definitely check it out. Also, to explain further about the Babel Fragment, it's connected to this magic system where you have the ability to forge things, that's what they call it, and in the book you'll kind of see different examples of that because it depends on what your affinity is towards. But anyway, side note, I love this book, cannot wait for the sequel. 2020 is kind of far away, so I'm gonna have to wait a little longer.
Just
definitely
a little bit
recommend
more.
it. The next book I want to talk about is a book that I have mentioned many times. I have read it many times since I was a child. It's The Secret Garden. I'm only holding up this edition because A, it's a newer one that I own and it's pretty. But I actually listened to an audiobook of The Secret Garden, and the specific reason I did that was because Karen Gillan narrated it. Can I just tell you how wonderful it is to read a book you love so dearly and hold so close to your heart, and to have someone read it to you who you also admire greatly?
Adore.
Karen Gillan's narration of The Secret Guardian is probably one of my favorite narrations of a book I have ever heard. I just love listening to her voice. Like, she just did the character so well, she did the story so much justice, and I was just like head over heels in love with how it was narrated. It gave me all the feels. Like, The Secret Garden has always been one of my favorite books. That particular version of it is now one of my favorite, like, adaptations of it, and I would highly recommend checking it out. It was free on Apple Books last year. I don't know if it's still free now, but if it is, definitely check it out.
Cool.
And the last book in this particular section is The Goose Girl by Shannon Hale. This is essentially a YA retelling of the Goose Girl fairy tale. It is about a princess who is tricked by her lady-in-waiting into switching places with her when they are headed towards a different kingdom for her to get married to the prince of that kingdom. And this girl, Anidori, she was actually hesitant about this whole like arranged marriage thing, because who would it be, really? But as she finds her place and finds her like own ability to stand up for herself and what she believes in and the magic that she possesses, like you see her really come into her own. And I think that really is the essence of what the Goose Girl story is about. Obviously, because it's a fairy tale and because it's a fairy tale retelling, you can kind of guess that it probably works out in the end for the good guys and not so much for the bad guys. But it was so delightfully charming, the way that Shannon Hale wrote these characters and used the original like elements of the story and wove them into this one were so good, and it was so addictive, and I just could not stop reading once I'd started. I will say the romance in it is so subtle. So subtle. But because I'm shipper trash, I basically fanned the subtlety and until it turned into a roaring blaze in my heart.
As one does.
But yeah, it was such a delight. I'm so glad I finally read this. I've been meaning to read it for like years, and I finally was just like, I'm gonna do it. And I did it, and I now regret not having read it before. So yeah, would highly recommend checking this one out. I'm so excited to read the companion novel sequel-ish thing this year. Speaking of shipper trash.
Speaking of shipper trash and fanning the flames, I have finally, in line with my bookish resolutions, crossed point something of it off and finally read the entire Fushigi Genbu Kaiden. That's right, for those of you who don't know, Fushigi is a time-honored classic that might necessarily have started its own trope of a young girl who has to cross over to another universe or another world and go on an epic quest that involves finding specific people that have been destined to aid her to complete it. In this case, legend says that of the 4 lands, each governed by a different sky full of stars, and a deity guardian on that, north, south, east, and west, Suzaku, Genbu, Byaku, and Seiryu, a priestess will come from another world to awaken all of the 7 star warriors of that land to summon the, guardian deity. In that case. In this case, it is Genbu, in a land sort of far up north. It's kind of frozen. And she is basically the first person from our Earth to travel to the land of the 4 gods to go on an epic quest, summon this god, in her case Genbu, in order to heal the broken land, which is really beautiful. So feels. I was yelling at Alexa for the most part because it has every single trope that anyone ever liked in Fushigi, and it has every single trope that everyone didn't.
It has the collect the reverse harem trope.
It has the
she falls in love with one of the
forbidden love.
Oh my gosh, the best.
It has the triangle, rectangle, nonagon.
It's never a rectangle. It's always like a nonagon.
There's some crap like that.
Like they're all a little bit in love.
There's the tragic backstories. There's the side characters everybody loves. Flip it over. It also has everything that everybody hated about Fushigi in droves. I think whatever was great about Fushigi was improved here. It is a prequel. It has happened in our time, I think, the early 19th century, to a girl named Takiko. And she is the Genbu no Miko, the priestess of Genbu. And from there, it's now a free-for-all to find who the warriors are. How does she survive the forbidden love that that is in store for her? And unlike Fushigi, this one actually ends. Spoilers. So
that's it. This one actually ends.
This actually ends. Spoilers. You can leave it at that. It actually ends. Like there's an ending to this thing. Unlike with Miyaka, which I'm just like, is this a 9th OAV? This ends clean, but also not. And by clean, I just mean that, a real ending. Where the story ends for Takiko and whoever it is that she falls in love with. And it's great. I love all of the characters. I just refuse to let them in because I don't want to spend the rest of the week sobbing hysterically. No, I made them all camp outside, and I'm like, I'm not letting any of you in because the last time I did, I sobbed for years. Oh wait, I'm almost crying because of Noriko. Again, everything you loved and hated about Fushigi is amped up in this series. I cannot wait till the Byaku arc happens. This leads straight into the Byaku arc, actually. So 2 things that I want to mention. Watase Yu, who basically wrote the series, has little notes in between chapters, and she's so inspiring. She talks about how terrible life as a mangaka is sometimes because it's so hard to do, because she hasn't learned how to do digital art, so everything's by hand. So in some of them she's like hacking her lungs up and she's very, very sick. I mean, it's been a rough year to try to get all of this stuff out, so I treasure that she worked so hard to get these. And so it's almost like seeing, the author's heart, not just in what she's written, but just in the production of it. And then there's so much. Does anybody here like fan fiction? Because everything you love about fan fiction is right here. And I've only known this from Alexa and her love for fan fiction, but every single now we're alone trope.
Oh my god, that's my favorite. Or we have to share a bedroll or a bed space. Or there's only one room and we all have to be in.
And this is the moment where we could possibly have sex. I'm like, oh my god. And I'm just reading this thing and I'm just like, okay, child, first of all, y'all just knew him for about a month. Okay, and I know y'all went through some life-changing things, but Really kind of want to be with him forever, really?
To be fair, in anime it is really generally like that, so.
Not all the time. Yona is taking 8 million years for Yona to figure out.
That's because that one is the trope where the one person is dense enough not to realize this.
I like that better because that was in her entire childhood and she still couldn't get it. Some people are like that. As opposed to some people who are like that, hey, it's been a month, but I love you forever.
Well, it kind of makes sense that they would feel that way because they don't understand it, so.
Right, and so hence the...
This is me defending fanfic.
In which case, you're gonna love this. So, again, if you love Fushigi Yugi, this is your deal.
So I have 3 more books to talk about. The first one, I know Kristen will be freaking thrilled about. It's The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss.
Look at that bug crusher.
I am surprised by how quickly I devoured this. I didn't think I would read it as fast as I did because it is pretty massive. But it was just so addictive. It is basically about a person named Quoth, and they are telling their story to a chronicler. So it pretty much covers the period from when he was a child up until he's a student at the university in this world. And I gotta tell you, I really like the idea of him telling this story to someone else. Even though it does give you like a sort of bias at the way the story plays out, because obviously he's gonna tell you like what he remembers and how he felt. It's not gonna be a third person objectively saying like this is what happened in the story. No, it's very obviously specifically biased towards him, and I really like that because I liked both. Like what Patrick Rothfuss successfully did for me was within two pages I was like, I care about this person. I really like him. I think he's such a fascinating human being. And I devoured his story. Like, in many ways, like, there were parts that really reminded me of Numair from Tamara Pierce. Like, there's, like, bits that remind me of that. And I was all for it because I love Numair, obviously. But Kvothe is, like, a character who you both want to smack because he's so effing arrogant sometimes, but also who you love because he's just got this like good heart, and he's also just like thirsty for knowledge and thirsty to make a name for himself, and you understand that desire so well. And I really enjoyed it, and I'm so happy I finally read it, and now I will read the sequel so that I can discuss with Kristen, and hopefully Maki will read it too, so Kristen will be happier if she wants you to read it as well.
Aye.
The next book I'm going to talk about is a book that made me very happy when it showed up in the mail, and I read it pretty much like 2 days after I got it, and that's The Bride Test by Helen Huang. This is the companion novel to The Kiss Quotient, which I read and loved last year, and this one focuses on the main character in The Kiss Quotient, Michael's cousin, Kai. So Kai is autistic, and his mom is sort of worried that that and a couple of other things are gonna, you know, mean he's alone for the rest of his life. And so she decides to take it into her own hands, goes to Vietnam, finds this girl, and then figures out a way to get the girl over to the States for the summer to meet Kai and, like, you know, maybe have a relationship with him, maybe not. And so Kai is not receptive to this at first, but eventually, like, Esme, who's the girl who comes from Vietnam, Esme starts, you know, to do things in a way that shows how much she understands him, and he starts coming to care for her, and obviously it's a very tentatively budding romance. They both have their own like goals in life and things that they need to overcome in this story, and it's just so good. I just really enjoy Helen Huang's writing. She's really good at giving you the swoony banter and like the difficult moments and the things that make relationships hard because you have to communicate properly. That's especially one of the things in this book. But what I also really loved about it is that both Kai and Esme are forced to confront things that are hard for them. They're forced to confront individual situations that they just have to face. And the best part is, like, even though they have each other, it's also very evident that they both have to stand up on their own 2 feet before they can even stand together, and I really enjoyed that. At the beginning I was like, this reads a lot like a drama, and then I got like halfway through it and I was like full-on cackling. Like, Maggie's like right there when I was cackling my butt off, because there is a moment in this book that involves Kai, his older brother Kwan, who is my favorite, oh my gosh, and the next book is going to be about him, and their cousin Michael, who is the love interest in The Kiss Quotient, and I was just like dying laughing, like I lost it. So I really enjoyed this one. I cannot wait for it to be out in May so that everyone else can read it and love it, and I hope you will. So the very last book I'm going to talk about in this video is The Blood Spell by C.J. Redwine. It is the 4th book in her Ravenspire series, which is like a bunch of companion novels, and they're all inspired by different fairy tales. This one is inspired by Cinderella, and going into it I was like, I really hope I like it, but Cinderella retellings aren't necessarily my favorite, so I don't know. And then I finished it and I was like, that was like really great. which is great. The last book in that series I hadn't really loved as much as the first two, so I was kind of worried, but I shouldn't have been because the blood spell was delightful. So it has two perspectives, which is like, I've been saying this a lot about the books I've read lately. Blue Delacour, who is an alchemist, and she has a little bit of fey blood, so she kind of can actually perform magic. And she works in a shop with her dad, brewing all sorts of potions and stuff like that. And the other perspective is Kellen, who is the crown prince who is about to inherit the throne, and so he has to choose a bride from among the head families in order to like consolidate all their power and all of that. Basically, he has to step into the political shoes that he was always meant to fill. They're family friends, which is part of the reason that their paths cross at all, but then they end up having to team up in order to defeat this evil magic that is trying to take over their kingdom. Okay, so the best parts of this book are, it takes a lot of the elements of the original Cinderella story and puts them in there in a way that's recognizable but also refreshing.
Cool.
The second thing that I love most about the story is that it's another like, I don't like you, but I tolerate you because I like your family sort of situation. And then they eventually become friends, and then they eventually realize they like each other, and it's just so great watching the progression of that relationship. Like, I was for it from the start. I was like, listen, you guys, it's kind of obvious that you are going to have a thing for each other, so let's just get going, shall we? So that was great. I also really like the whole magical side of things. I thought that was really interesting and fun to read, though I will say that I did guess at something very early on. Like, I told this theory to Rachel from Hello Charlie, and I was like, listen, this is my theory, I think this is what it is. And she's like, I'm not telling you, because she had finished this book by then. And then when I finished the book, I was like, I was right! I really enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed Kellen and I enjoyed Blue. They both have their own, again, one of my favorite things is very similar to what I loved about the Bride Test. They both have their own individual things that they have to make peace with and they have to come to terms with. And it's great getting to see them have that opportunity, like, apart. But then it's also fun to see them together and like watch sparks fly. It's great. I also really like the secondary characters, like Blue's grandmother, Blue's father, Kellen's mom, who is like a great queen mom. Like, seriously, you'd think that she would be a little more like overbearing and stuff like that, but she's actually great. And his little sister Nessa, who actually speaks in sign language, which I thought was really cool.
That was cute.
Yeah, it was great. And I just loved it. I thought it was really well done. I thought it was a very unique and refreshing take on the Cinderella story. And I'm hoping that whatever comes next from the Ravenspire series will inspire the same sort of feelings of love from me.
Cool.
Okay, so there you have it. That is the end of this What We Read video. We hope you enjoyed it. If you've read any of the books in our video, we would love to hear what you thought of them, and we would also love to know what you're reading, because like I said last week, I am a very nosy person and I just like knowing what other people are reading.
And plus, it's just really nice that we talk about that kind of stuff. So yeah, comments, we're usually good about that, so
if you want to see more videos from us, we would love it if you subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, we post every Friday, or try to. So far, we've been really good this year. Hopefully
January.
Hopefully it stays the same. We beat it. Anyway, we'll see you guys next week with another video. Bye!